So what I thought that we could talk about is for you to tell us how what did you do when you got out of high school? Like in the first, for the at the beginning, let's say to everyone that you are from Canada, born in Canada, like we have talked, because it's not so common to see someone born in Canada. Is Ontario, right?
Yeah, I'm in Ontario. Yeah.
Yeah. So you finished high school and then you went to do your bachelor's degree. So what was your bachelor's degree? What did you do when you left high school?
Okay, so I left high school and I went right to university and did my bachelor's degree. And I did that in criminology. So at the time, I was actually interested in law, criminal science, criminal justice. So I started doing my undergrad in that. So that was a 4-year program. So it was kind of how criminology is made up here. It's sociology, psychology, and law. So you kind of get 3 different avenues and ways that you can go with it. Originally, I wanted to go into parole and probation. So that was kind of my my goal in the beginning. But as I started taking more and more law classes in the first year or 2, I realized that that wasn't really where I was supposed to be. So I was just kind of keeping things open. And at the time I was working in group homes, so like residential homes for kids, youth, and adults actually, who were duly diagnosed and had like social, emotional, and behavior problems. So at that time, that was kind of my experience. So I ended up just kind of sticking that route. And then once I was done my undergrad, I worked a couple different places. And yeah, it's been a long journey getting to where I am now, but it's interesting because I've had a lot of different experience along the way, and it's opened a lot of doors for me, that experience. So I've kind of dipped my feet into multiple areas in the field to get where I am now.
So you did your bachelor, and while you were doing your bachelor, like a 4 years degree, you also worked in different places. So when and why? And I know that you have something like you started some course, some other master's degree. You were supposed to like have this degree a long time ago. Sal had told me, because I had some experiences in that way. So what did you do until now? So until you finished your master's degree that you just did recently.
So yeah, I was working. I worked through a bunch of different residential homes, and then I worked in the school boards for a couple of years. And I fell upon.
Let's just explain to people, what are these residential homes?
Okay. Yep. So residential homes, group homes, for any child. So the one that I worked at was any age from, I think the youngest was about 3 up until adulthood. So as long as they were duly diagnosed, which means they have 2 diagnoses of a developmental disability and another sort of diagnosis. They had to have 2 different things to be eligible to be at this group home. So I worked mostly with younger kids who had autism and other developmental disabilities, but I also worked in a home with youth who had things like ADHD, who were in trouble with the law, who were at risk of being kicked out of school, that kind of thing. So I did have a very wide range of experience at this one place. I was there for about 3 years, and then I moved on to some other different group homes with different populations.
And I'm sorry, sometimes I will interrupt you just to know more, because it's something that totally different for us. So this is a service that is provided by the government, and like these people usually go there like for twice a week or every day, like a couple of hours a week, something like that.
So most of these kids lived in these homes. So they were full on 24/7 care. In most cases, the children or clients had been taken from their families for whatever reason, safety, abuse, neglect, or the fact that they were just a lot, like their challenges were really, really difficult for the parents to handle. In some cases, the family members also had disabilities and were not able to take care of the children when they became a certain age, or, you know, started to develop some challenging behaviors and aggression. So most of the kids were living there 24/7. There was a few cases here and there where parents would come and get their kids for the weekends or do like a sleepover one time a week. Some parents would come once a week or once a month and have supervised visits. So someone would have to be watching the visits. So everybody's situation was different, but I would say 95 to 100% of the clients in these different homes, like this agency, were all there 24/7. Yeah, they lived there.
Wow. And what a tough place to work. Like you really need to have your emotions in place, like to be like a good professional there, because it's not easy. So what did you do there?
So we were called residential counselors or behavioral counselors. And this is where I was first introduced to ABA, but it wasn't running fully the way that you would expect. There was a psychologist, a clinical supervisor, and then there was multiple homes, right? There was adult homes, there was youth homes, and then there was children's homes. Every child had different diagnoses and different programming. So basically, this clinical psychologist would be responsible for overseeing treatment programs, so behavioral treatment programs, mostly surrounded around like reduction of aggression or verbal aggression, you know, just really challenging behaviors, less focused on skill build. It was more these programs were really reduced, or like were focused around reducing challenging behaviors. So every kid would have like we would call them a key worker. So one of the staff that worked in the home would be responsible for their programming and taking their data on the programs. So we had to do things like ABC data, you know, where we are writing the antecedent behavior consequence of what happened in that situation. We would collect that, and then I think it was every month or every 2 weeks or every month, we would have a huge meeting with all the other staff and the clinical supervisor to go over and, you know, change up programs as needed. So that was really my first introduction to ABA there. But we were responsible for, you know, daily care, giving medication, just client routines throughout the day, also taking them out for community outings, taking them to day programs or to school, whatever it was that they were doing at the time, and then also implementing these behavior programs and managing behaviors throughout the day.
Okay. So you stayed there like for about 3 years, like you said, and then you went to work on a school board.
I actually jumped around a few different group homes. I started working in an adult group home only for adults. And then I also worked at, it was called a secure treatment center. So it was for only youth at risk of being, they were at risk with the law. So they were charged with something and were mandated to be in this secure unit for a while and get help.
Antecedent strategy.
Yeah. And it was kind of like they call it a secure unit because their rooms, everything was watched. You know, some of these kids were on suicide watch. Some of them were there for like serious aggressions. So they needed to be watched 24/7, and their rooms were actually locked. Every room that you would enter into was locked. So it was like a probation, you know, a lot of these kids were on probation, and it was that kind of a facility where everything was on lockdown, and they needed to be watched 24/7 for safety. So I did
coming there. Back to you.
Sorry?
Law coming back to you.
Exactly.
It was your first interest.
Yeah, it was. And I was there also throughout my university experience, throughout my undergraduate degree. So a lot of that probation parole interest came from that position as well. So I was there, and I also worked. A lot of these jobs were part-time. So I would work at 2 or 3 different places at the same time, right? Group homes, or then I started working at the school board as an educational assistant. So it's, you know, someone who provides that one-to-one extra support for those kids who have any kind of challenge, learning disabilities or behavioral challenges or social challenges, etc.
So a school board is like a place who you have that sends help for different districts or schools, something like that.
Ours is a little bit different here. So we don't actually contract out. The school boards here have their own staff, and that's how they manage things. So, which is, you know, sometimes a problem. So the school boards here, you can either go into public, like it's all public school, but you can go, there's 4 different school boards: French public, or French Catholic, or English public, English Catholic. Okay, so those are kind of your 4 options. So I was working in an English Catholic school board, and I worked in a variety of schools. I also worked in a public board as well, but they have their own behavior specialists. They're really just people who have worked up to getting that position. So like behavior consultants that would go in and write programs for certain kids. However, not a lot of them would necessarily have any behavior background or training, like any special training to do this position. So that's why they have struggled with that over the last while. So now the schools are starting to hire behavior analysts to come in, right? So they started opening it up and posting external jobs for people who actually have the education and the background to come in and fill these positions. So that's really good news. So that's going well. And ABA is being now disseminated throughout the schools that way. So not all school boards yet have adopted that, but I think 2 out of the 4 that are around this area have started to hire behavior analysts. So that's good news.
Yeah, sure. And then you went to do your master's program. So on that point, you saw, okay, I think that I will go to this field of ABA. I like that. How was
that was
transition?
I kind of I stumbled into it, and it was a little bit of a journey, because what happened was after the group homes and the schools, I applied at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. They have their own autism intervention program. So they are one of the biggest and considered the best programs in, you know, this area for autism specifically. So I got a job there, and I had heard through the grapevine, very like previous to getting this position, about a BCBA and how you can work up to that. But it wasn't very big around here. Like, you know, not a lot of people knew about it. All of these people at CHEO that I was learning from, none of them had BCBAs. Some of them had masters, some of them didn't, right? They were just working in the field of ABA for so many years. We're not regulated here yet in Canada, so it's not a well-known thing. It's getting there now. But, you know, when I started at the Children's Hospital, which was 7 years ago now, it wasn't very well known. So I did start my coursework, and this is what Sal was probably talking about. I started my coursework at that time to become a BC ABA. And unfortunately, when I got hired at CHIO, they didn't have anybody to supervise me for my hours. So I got my coursework done towards the BC ABA, however, could not get supervised. And they didn't have anybody there to provide that. So I kind of pushed that aside while I was working in this position, debated going to get my master's, wasn't really sure. And then I ended up leaving after having my first child because I decided that that was the route that I wanted to take and I needed to be able to get supervised somewhere. So at that point, my previous BC ABA coursework had expired because it expires every 5 years, right? If you don't do your supervision. So at that point, I had to restart those courses over. So I had to take 3 over again. So
and
I took
pay for them again.
Oh, yes. So at that point, I decided, okay, I'm going for my BC ABA. I'm going to get out of my current position so that I can get supervised. So I left my job, went and met Sal, and I had him start supervising me. And at that point, I had finished up or was finishing up the 3 courses that I had to retake. So started my coursework, and it didn't take Sal very long to convince me to do the full thing, do my master's, do my BCBA.
So at the beginning, you were just thinking, okay, I will take those coursework and that's it for now, but no.
No, it was more or less because the idea of a master's at that point, I had 1 child, I was pregnant with my second, and I was like, I don't know if I can handle doing a master's right now. I wasn't interested, but Sal, he was great because he really pushed me and he explained the differences in in opportunities that would give me. And at the time, I didn't realize because Canada wasn't, not a lot of people were getting certified. This wasn't well known. So I thought if I have my BC ABA, it's still something above like what most people have. But it's funny because in the time that I've done my master's, it's like really getting up there now. So I'm kind of happy I went this route because now I'm like, a little bit ahead of the game. But yeah, so I started that supervision towards my BC ABA, and then Sal convinced me to apply to UWF, University of West Florida. So I did do that and finished my supervision hours with him in November. And then I just finished up my master's. So now I'm just studying to write the exam.
Wow.
Yeah.
And a lot has happened, especially because 2 kids came on the way. So I totally get that. It's not easy to get all that done with 2 kids because some people who doesn't have kids or are not married, they are always complaining, oh, I don't have time. My life is so tough. Okay. And I say, okay, you don't know what it is.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but I'm, it's a little bit of a blur, to be honest. Like looking back, I'm like, wow, because my son was only 2 when I started my supervision, and I had a newborn, and I had both of them home with me, and I was doing my supervision, started my master's, so it was hectic, but it's over now. And so I'm almost at the end of my goal here. So it was worth it.
Yeah, you're pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And what, how and your master's degree was an online program, just for people to know, because West Florida is in Florida, you're in Canada. So how did you do your supervision hours? Let's tell people, because it's totally different here, but let's just tell your experience, because each people has different experiences with supervision hours. So let's say, how was your supervision hours? How did you do?
So I actually started back in March of 2018. So it took me almost 3 years to complete my hours.
1,500, right?
Yep, 1,500. Yep. So yeah, I accumulated them pretty slowly because I wasn't working full time. I had the babies at home. I was working part-time here and there. I didn't go back to my job after having my son, like I mentioned. So I actually started my own business after my second son. Because like I said, here in Canada, we're not regulated. So I had Sal supervising me at the time. So I decided to do some private practice just so that I could get used to doing that, since that was one of my goals. So I had Sal overseeing all my clients. So I accumulated things pretty slowly. Prior to opening my business and taking over some clients, I was doing different jobs for Sal. So I was accumulating hours by helping him with research projects, helping him with different projects that he had for the school, like designing a curriculum. I helped create some training activities for Chartlytics, which was where he was first working, which is the precision teaching software company. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of like was dipping my toes a little bit everywhere, like anywhere that I could get hours, I was helping him. He was giving me lots of opportunities. And then when I started running my business, I was accumulating hours by, working one-to-one with families. I had clients that I was working with one-to-one. And then I also had clients that I had like a behavior therapist. So like an RBT mm-hmm. without the credential. She was working one-to-one and I was supervising that client. So I did that until the end of my hours. And I just finished back in November, this past November.
You have different possibilities to accumulate hours, because mm-hmm. usually here, when you think about hours, like we just think about hours in attending the clients. So mm-hmm. being with clients, like in one-to-one therapy or going to schools with them. So we usually think like that when we mm-hmm. think about hours. But no, you have multiple opportunities mm-hmm. on valid activities mm-hmm. for these hours.
Yep. Like I had a lot more is it unrestricted now? The unrestricted hours. So like the supervisory duties, I had more of those hours than I did have the one-to-one hours with clients.
Okay. So. Great. I forgot about that mm-hmm. Because I don't track things like with the BACB anymore, because it's not valid. It was never valid in Brazil, but now they specifically had told that nobody who lives outside US or Canada, they can't do they can't take the test. So it's like really specific now, but many people in Brazil, they had done the certification. But the problem here is with the master, because like our post-graduation is a master.
Yeah.
But the name is different, and they don't like, they just saw the name. They just look like in a topography way, not on a functional way. So if they see, oh, it's a post-graduation, it's not a master. So no, you can't. It's not.
So would that be like equivalent to like an undergrad degree, like college or university?
Yes, because here a post-graduation is something like, because here we call like the dogs. I had told you that I have 5 dogs.
Yeah, problem.
And a turtle and 3 rabbits. So it's
hectic.
3 rabbits. So it's really easy here. So here you do your graduation, because here we call it graduation. It's a graduation. You have a graduate degree here.
Yeah.
When you do a 4 years course, 4 or 5 years, you get your degree. And here we call this degree a graduate degree. So you do, it could be a bachelor, but it cannot be, it also can be something else that it's not a bachelor. And then you go and do a course after your graduation, after this 4-year course. We call that a post-graduation or a specialization.
Okay.
That you are going to study a specific field. Mm-hmm. So this usually is a 2 years course. And many people, they don't do master's or doctoral degrees, because master's and doctoral are more for people who want to research or be in some university, teaching in a university. So we have something that it's called a professional master's degree, that it's more like for the field. But like most of people, they do like post-graduation. Like I can do like, it has people who has like 3-4 different post-graduations. But so that's the problem, because all the educational system is really different. Like we are talking different things. So that's why we always need to go deep and say, okay, so what are you calling graduation? What are you calling post-graduation? Because just on the name, we would be like, it would be really messy. So that's a major thing here.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. So I think that the super and another thing, in Brazil, we don't have this thing on doing supervision hours in any profession. Like you can do 5 years of law school, go pass your board exams, and go do a case, like a big case. You don't need nobody supervising you. Like you have some supervision at school, but it's called an internship. That it's it's part of your classes at university. But after you graduate, there is nothing anymore.
Oh wow.
So that's not something like really common. You can have a judge who passed it on, who did a law school, and then he went and did like, I think it's 2 years of practice to be a judge, like 2 or 3 years of practice. I don't know, but you don't need anyone supervising you, like even to be a judge. And you have like things, residency in medical schools. Okay, and you will have some supervision there because it's a residence, but not in no other profession. So we don't have all this. It's not part of our culture and of our system. I think that supervision hours are pretty good. It's a good thing, but like it's not something that we don't even have enough people to supervise everyone.
Yeah, see, that's tough because here, not in all professions, but in a lot of them, it is required, right?
Yep, US and Canada, they are really pretty much with this system in all professions, in almost all professions. And it's not part of our system. So that's why put things like equivalence are really different, because all the structure in laws, in educational arrangements, everything is different. So it's pretty tough to do some equivalence.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the supervision hours here were very helpful in my situation anyways. I learned definitely the coursework gives you a very good foundation, but I find the supervision hours are key when you're actually applying those skills and that knowledge that you've learned in school, when you're applying it to real people and real cases. And like for someone like me in Canada, like I said, we haven't been regulated, and BCBAs and all of this it's not been well known until the last few years, So I've been in the field for over 13 years working with families and students and kids. And so I know that in the States, it's very different. A lot of people they graduate high school and they can go right into this, become an RBT. So they might not necessarily have as much fieldwork experience, right? Because they're going right into the school. And then that supervision for them is very key, because that's where they're able to apply those skills to real cases. And they, to have that supervision there is important. But even for me, someone who's been in the field for 13 years, that was really helpful to becoming a behavior analyst and how I can see things. That's where I learned a lot of, the skills that I have is through my supervision and being able to apply it.
Yeah,
so definitely happy we have that.
Yeah.
And
we had talked like in a previous conversation that we had, I think it was last year or something like that we were talking about Canada. So let's tell people a little of how services are provided in Canada. So when someone has a son and have a diagnosis or before the diagnosis, where do they go? Who pays for that? Because we know that we are just having people of ABA now in certain positions, like in clinics and schools. But it's not something we don't. I believe that it does not exist like many centers who provides ABA therapy. So let's tell people how things are in Canada, because we speak a lot about the United States. And usually people, they don't know a lot of Canada and how things work. And you are like a really Canadian citizen.
Yep, I am. Yeah, no problem. So it's been up and down, but currently we don't have any coverage for, so it's not like the States. There's insurance for ABA services, and we don't have that here. We don't have any coverage. Families are eligible to get like a one-time funding, kind of like a lump sum from government. But that's only been the last couple of years as our programming and all of that, our autism program for Ontario is kind of in the middle of, it's in a transition period. So we had new government come in and take over. And I remember it was 2016, a new government came in and they were canceling services for anybody over the age of 5. So because the research says that, intensive behavioral intervention is more effective for kids at preschool age, they took that as, hey, we're going to cut services for anybody over the age of 5 and just put all of our funding and effort into kids under 5, which we're like, hey, autism doesn't end at 5. So, what are these other kids going to do? So I was working at a government program at that point, the hospital, and they were looking at cutting services for those kids under 5 at that time. And they were slowly transitioning out kids over the age of 5. So it was there was like an uproar, all the parents were protesting. There was a lot of that kind of going on at the time. And unfortunately, it still really hasn't been figured out. So basically, parents have 2 options. They get their child diagnosed, and then typically they're looking at occupational therapists, for services, ABA, counseling, speech. So they kind of have those that variety of service to get help, right? So most of those things are private pay. So parents are paying, out of their pocket to get these services. So when it comes to ABA, there are private funded practices. So there are centers, ABA centers, that parents will send their kids to and pay upwards of, $70,000 a year to put these kids in these full-time programs. It's run kind of like a school, but it's intensive behavior intervention every single day to try to get them up to speed. And then there was, the government funded program that I was working in, and our wait list was 2 years long. So a lot of families would get 2 to 3 years. So a lot of families would get the diagnosis, they would put their children on the wait list, and then they would pay for private programming in the meantime while they were waiting. So, yeah. And then their kids would come to the children's hospital program for, kids were there anywhere between 1 and 3 years. And then they were usually discharged and they would have to go into school full time. Now, the way that we would run it is our kids would come to us 4 days a week, and then 1 day a week they were in school. So they still had that little bit of idea of how school would run, so that the transition was a bit easier when they got discharged. Now, the problem was that once those kids had all this intensive behavior intervention, then they would move into the schools and there was no support, no resources to continue, that kind of system for them. So it was rough, but that's the avenue that most people take. A lot of people will pay for private therapy, even a couple hours a week just to have something. So right now we're fighting for needs-based therapy, not age-based therapy, right? So all the activists and the parents and behavior analysts out there right now are fighting for needs-based therapy. And the government keeps promising us a plan by this time, and then it gets pushed back, and it's been years now. We're closer, but it's a fight, it's a battle. So we're looking to get therapy based on that child's individual needs and not necessarily the age, right? So we're hoping that will come into play eventually. But for now, parents are given, and again, because it's age-based therapy, they are given a lump sum, a one-time funding, a lump sum of $20,000 for children under the age of 5, and then $5,000 for over the age of 5. So such a big difference. That $5,000 when you're getting speech therapy, occupational therapy, and ABA is going to last you a month, not even. So it's rough. Parents are struggling. Parents are mortgaging their houses and just doing the best that they can to access these services for their kids,
And now they have, the government, they have COVID to blame. So
yep.
They stay.
There's a lot of virtual therapy going on these days.
Yeah. So usually, how much does it cost, ABA therapy? Like you said, if you want your kid in schools, in a center, you said 7,000 a year. But how much usually costs an hour of therapy? It's usually if you work on private practice and you charge going to the family's house, an RBT, how usually things work? If you go to provide outside centers.
Yeah. So it's kind of all over the place here right now because, like I said, we're not regulated and we did just get approved to be regulated. So behavior analysts will be regulated in the next year or so, I think. But right now it's kind of just up to whoever. So like I said, anybody can provide ABA. So I don't have a BCBA right now. I have my master's, but I'm providing service. So I charge less than somebody would if they're a BCBA already who's providing a private practice. So it can cost anywhere, private can cost anywhere from $40 an hour to $120 an hour. It just depends on who is providing the service and what's included and how many hours you're doing, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to a center, the new funding that came in, that one-time funding, they cover $55 an hour for therapy. And that's supposed to cover most of what would go into a center per hour. So usually an RBT, and this is going to differ, it's going to differ between places. Some private clinics, RBTs get paid $17 an hour. And then when you go into the government funded, when I was, we were called instructor therapists because RBT wasn't really a thing here. It's still just becoming a thing. So we were called instructor therapists and we had provincial training and stuff to go through as well. But we would get paid the same as a nurse. So we were getting paid $36 an hour to work as an RBT in a government funded children's hospital center, right? But in the private practices, because they're for profit, those RBTs or one-to-one workers are getting paid a lot less, and essentially so are the supervisors, right? So it really does range in what you're going to pay depending on where you go and the setup. But yeah, I would say like when I was providing service to families last year with an RBT under me. Sorry, she wasn't an RBT, a behavior therapist. And she was getting charged, or she was getting paid $25 an hour to work one-to-one with the child. And then I charged my supervision, which was, I think, like 40 something an hour at that time.
Okay.
So yeah, it can really differ.
And usually when there is like a behavioral therapist working, it depends the number of hours. It has people who stays like an hour, 2 hours a day with the kid. It depends on how much the parents can afford.
Yeah. So yeah, like most parents who they're paying out of their pocket for private practice, but it's really just going to depend on what, like I know families that came to me and they couldn't afford the centers. So they would do less hours throughout the week. And because I was a cheaper rate, because I was just in my master's program, you know, I had a lot of experience in the field, but I didn't necessarily have the credentials. So I charged less. So they were able to afford me providing 12 hours a week rather than like a center providing, 40 hours a week. So they just kind of have to find, and with private practice, some BCBAs out there who are providing service, they might say, we have a minimum of 12 hours a week that you have to sign up for. Whereas like for me, I'm like, whatever you can afford and whatever you can do will make work, right? So my goals and treatment goals for that child would depend very much on how many hours a week, right? If you're only going to be able to afford 4 hours a week, well, then we kind of have to work with our goals, according to how many hours you're going to have.
And what are your plans now? I know that you will probably be studying to take your board exams. And I don't know if you are working right now due to COVID and everything. Are you working now?
Yeah. So I still have my business. Now I'm slowly switching over to a different kind of service. So it's going to be less, to families with autism, and we're actually focusing on, I have a business partner as well, and we're actually focusing on sleep intervention. So I just finished a mentorship in sleep. I did a supervision, like 4-week course series with a well-known behavior analyst in the States who does sleep intervention only. So she has mentored. Sorry?
Like for kids?
Anybody. Not like anybody, adults, children, people with diagnoses, typically developing children, anybody, because it's the same treatment. Okay. So yeah, so we took her supervision series, and now we're being mentored, and she's going to start overseeing some of our cases because we're really interested in focusing solely on sleep intervention in the future. For now, we're still providing like regular behavior consulting. I also do reading intervention with some kids. So I'm just kind of doing a few things for now, but once we're set with the sleep, we'll be focusing mostly on sleep intervention.
So usually people will look for you guys when they have some problems with sleep issues, like my kid doesn't sleep in their bedroom, he wake up at night, things like that.
Yep. And adults too, who like can't fall asleep very well, or they can't stay asleep. They're not getting enough sleep. It's really the same kind of, it's the same problems that we run into with sleep, regardless of who's sleeping or like who it is, right, that has the issues. So there's really like a few different ways that you can treat it. So we focus on those 4 things. And then depending on what the problem is, we kind of, we obviously individualize to whatever the family's needs are. But it's interesting. Like we're learning a lot about sleep, and it's actually something that a lot of people struggle with. And it's one of those things that you can use ABA and provide it to anybody. You know, it can
How
be kids with autism.
How did you go to that? You are like a box of surprises. You come with different perspectives on ABA, on behavioral things. I am like criminology, like you are going to sleep. Okay.
You know, like, it's all of the different things that I've kind of had a chance to experience have gotten me to this place. And from the girl in the States who was training us. And I was like, this is so cool because you can apply it like to anybody. And I'm like, it just opens up such a big door to be able to, you know, you can apply it virtually. You don't have to be in the people's houses. So it's just like, it gives so much more opportunity to help more people. And it's something that, you know, when you do say there's multiple people in the family that aren't sleeping, you can help. Even if you help one person, it's going to help the family situation, like sleep. And it's one of those things that is really good bang for your buck because you get a lot out of it. You know, it's like people are learning these sleep skills, and it's something that generalizes, you know, and it maintains over a long period of time.
It's frozen here. I will just switch my internet for a different one, so it will be unstable for some seconds. Let me. When I asked you, how did you went for that? At the same time, it frozen the connection. So I listened everything, but the part that you said why. It didn't came for me. So how and why? Why you said, but how?
Like how we got into sleep?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I watched a webinar.
Okay.
Yeah, from the same lady who is training us right now. So she's big in the States. She owns her own consulting company and she works only with sleep problems. And she worked under Dr. Hanley. So she had some good experience. She's been working in sleep treatment for about 8 years. And just listening to her webinar, I thought this is something really cool because so many people, it's something like 60% of kids with autism suffer. I think it's like 67% or something like that. The kids with autism suffer with sleep issues. And also like, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's also very high for typically developing kids, right? So it's just one of those things that we can offer using ABA to help just a wide range of people. And it's something quick. The intervention's usually only a couple weeks long. So you can just help that many more people. And I like being able to apply ABA to a variety of situations and people, you know, not necessarily like sticking to that autism thing. And it can definitely be used for be helpful for kids with autism, but I just like being able to apply it to anybody who's needing it.
Yeah, definitely. And you can continuing on consulting autism cases?
Yep. Currently, yeah, I do have, I have 2 clients that have autism and another one who actually doesn't have any diagnosis. He just struggles with reading. So I'm helping with reading there. Yeah.
And you are for reading, you are using DI, direct instruction?
Yeah, I use the Maloney method, which is a Canadian.
Yes. Yeah. I had known the Maloney method. He's the guy from Canada, right?
He is. Yeah. So he actually trained me on his program.
Really?
And I fell in love with it. Now, the only thing is like my clients, I find like they are only getting service one day a week, if not 2 days a week for a couple hours. So I do find that it's a slower going process with them using the Maloney method because it's designed to be used every day in schools. It still works. Like it's a great program. I love it. But I do tweak things a little bit here and there to try to like quicken the process. And then I also get mentorship from Amy Evans, who Sal hooked me up with in the beginning. She runs her own practice and she is an academic. Like she specializes in academics. So she's like an academic coach and she does a lot with reading. So she'll help me out and consult on my cases every now and then to help me.
On reading.
Yeah. She does reading, math, writing. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. This name, Amy Evans, is not it's strange for me. I don't know if Sal had mentioned it, but it's not a strange name. But I will not be surprised if in a year from now you bring me another application on ABA in your practice or something like that, because you are full of surprises in your box of practices. Yeah. And also, I know that your husband, he works in schools. He still works.
Yeah, he did for a very, very long time. However, he just left. He is running his catering company full time. So he's actually, he's a caterer and he owns a food truck. So that's what he does. Wow. It's been his lifelong dream and he's finally full time doing that. So.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's going for his dreams, he's right, of course.
Yeah.
Wow. So a lot had happened in this period.
Yeah. It's been a road. Yeah.
And your kids, they are at school, because you told me that you were with them. It was because of COVID.
Yeah. So my oldest is 4 and my youngest is 2. So my oldest is in school. But right now we're on lockdown. So he is at home. Today we have a little friend down the road, and so we share daycare. So he's there. And then my little guy's in daycare full time. Yeah.
Okay. So you guys are on lockdown again.
Yeah, we are again until May 20th, but they're going to extend it till June. Yeah. It's nonstop here. We're constantly in lockdowns. Yeah.
But you guys were vaccinated already?
So our vaccination process is actually very, very, very slow. I just got vaccinated on Sunday. And so now
it's for the very
first.
Okay.
Yeah. So within the month of May, though, by the end of May, everybody over the age of 18 should be eligible to start getting their vaccine. So it will happen quicker now, but it was a very slow going process for sure.
Wow. So
yeah,
pretty different from the US. Like we here, I think that I will be vaccinated just like by December or January of next year. That's my expectation. The government is saying about December, but not even my parents, they were not vaccinated yet. And they are like 58 and 59 years old, my parents. Yeah. So they weren't vaccinated yet, but many people who works as health areas, they were already vaccinated. But we have lots of people to vaccinate it, so it will take a while until everyone gets vaccinated, because it does not have vaccines for everyone.
Yep.
So we can't escape from that. We just have to wait. Okay, that's what we have for now.
Yeah, too bad. Well, we're slowly catching up now, but we were very behind for a while. But that's right now, we're definitely doing better than you guys are, it sounds like. So, yeah, my parents got vaccinated about a month and a half ago, and they're in their 60s. So,
yeah, but it's slow. Like for Canada, I thought that you guys were all vaccinated because it's not a really big country.
Yep. No.
So comparing with the United States, it's really slow in Canada. That's why I got surprised. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
Yeah. So I want to thank you so much, because I think that we could cover a lot of topics and tell people how things are in Canada, and especially how things in autism are in Canada. So they are not, because we usually think, oh, Brazil is so bad. So I think that we are not so bad, comparing like the money that we have with the money that it has in Canada. So I think that Canada is, I had read lots of parents. It has even families who moves for the US to have like more treatment. So something that definitely needs to be taken care in Canada.
Well, it's province. It is province. It goes province by province here too, right? But in Canada, there's no full funding or anything, but every province has different coverage. So I know that a lot of families from Ontario are moving to Alberta, because as Alberta has better programming and better coverage there, or better funding. So, that's a thing as well. It's just like the states, that each state has their own rules and regulations and all of that. But yeah, so Ontario, we're working on it.
Here in Brazil, things are more nationalized. Usually when we have more like federal laws, it's not like in the US and Canada that we can have like really different situations depending on states or provinces.
Yeah.
It's funny that.